What's happening, everybody? Welcome into a brand new episode of Crossed Up. Anthony Sanfilippo's here. I'm Bob Wankel. Anthony, before I get into all of my ranting and raving, you were there. You covered both games at Citi Field this week. Obviously, everybody's probably taken in all the post-game reactions on the radio, television. They've been online looking and reading. Do you have anything interesting or insightful to add based on your own observations and personal experience that hasn't already been said? I think I have some unique twists to all of this, but I want to give you an opportunity to bring the journalistic background to the show first.
Yeah. Here's the thing that really stood out the most to me. And it wasn't a question that I was even going to ask going into the clubhouse after they lost last night. But I kind of got the sense after talking to several guys, and then I asked this question to Kyle Schwarber. I said, last year when you guys lost to the Diamondbacks, we walked into the clubhouse and there was an overwhelming feeling of disbelief, as in, how could this have possibly happened? This year feels different. Can you describe what that emotion is? And so, because it was not disbelief when we walked in this year. It was almost, my perspective, it was almost resigned to the fact that this happened to them. Like, it hit right away, and not that they were expecting it, but that it was something that was recognized much sooner than it was last year. And the word that he used when answering it was unsettling. And I thought that was interesting. So you went from disbelief to unsettled, and, Castellanos said they could have done things differently. Interesting, and Trey Turner called it a failure, which it was.
He was right about that.
Yeah. So there was it was a lot different feeling in the clubhouse. I mean, you were there last year with me, and you remember, right?
It was a feeling of disbelief. It felt inevitable that they would win that series and go to the World Series and win a championship.
Yep.
And then there was a plot twist. This series, it felt inevitable, quite frankly, from the 8th inning of game 1. If we're being honest with ourselves, it sort of felt inevitable that this was going to happen to them this week. It shouldn't have, and they had opportunities to prevent it from happening. But if we're being real, at least by the middle of game 3, this felt like an inevitable outcome.
Yeah, certainly by game 3. I mean, game 1 is where it was ultimately lost, because you wasted Zach Wheeler. If you win that game, you get to game 5. And you get Zach Wheeler again. And you feel like if they would have gone in, if we were here today and we're talking about preparing for a game 5, we're probably still pretty confident that they're going to win, even though they didn't hit for 4 games. Right? We're probably still feeling that way because
just score 2 runs. Just find a way to score 2 runs and you'll win.
Yeah, because of Zach Wheeler, right?
Yeah.
So that, in essence, was when they lost the series, losing that game. But yeah, it didn't really hit you until game 3 that they're not going to hit in this. They're just not going to hit. It's going to take a miracle to come through to win. And that's why we kept saying things like, Ranger gets through those first 2 innings in game 4, leaving the bases loaded twice without giving up a run. And you say, that is a gift from the baseball gods.
Yep.
Hit the ball, score a couple runs, and you could win this series. And they just never did.
Well, look, the bottom line when you assess what has happened here is that this is a complete and utter failure.
Yes.
I don't want to say that they have to detonate the entire roster, or that they're totally lost, or they're screwed, or enjoy the next 20 years of no championships. I don't need to oversell what occurred here, but this was a complete and utter failure. One that, by their own measure, and one thing I was a little bit annoyed about listening to it post-game last night, there were admissions that we could have done things differently, or Turner himself said it was a failure, but they were the ones They were the ones at the beginning of the season in Clearwater talking about World Series, gotta win it all, championship or bust, the owner, I want my fucking trophy back. They were the ones that set the table that anything less than a championship run would be graded as unacceptable. And this was far less than a championship run. And they played like losers. And like, I don't mean to sound hot takey. I don't mean to, get on here and try to like stir the pot for an awesome sound clip, but they were dictated to throughout the vast majority of this 4-game series. They were on their heels. And you can argue that they were 34 and 37 over the last 71 games, including the playoffs. Maybe we overrated this team just because they got off to such a strong start. Maybe the writing was on the wall for 3+ months. I don't know. What I do know is that you have a veteran group of guys that are handsomely paid that in moments have proven that they are elite or close to elite level baseball players who in this series were dictated to. They got punched in the mouth. They had a nice little rally in game 2, and then they were absolutely dead men walking for the majority of the 18 innings that they played up at Citi Field this week. It was a fucking embarrassment. Ranger Suarez, Zach Wheeler, Nick Castellanos, Bryce Harper, and for 5 innings, Aaron Nola. The rest of those guys, 0.
Yep.
0. Kyle Schwarber included. Those first 2 at-bats, you set the tone in game 1, awesome.
Yeah.
Horrible thereafter.
Yeah. Oh, you're spot on, Bob. I mean, that's exactly right. I mean, it's amazing to think. This goes to show just how bad the lineup and the bullpen were. Their starting pitchers gave up 6 runs in 4 games, and they lost 3 of them.
Every single starting pitcher gave their team a chance to win, and that includes Aaron Nola, who I would say in full assessment was a little bit underwhelming, and we could have the conversation about you pay this guy $170 million and then you get outpitched by Sean Manaea. That we could do that, but it's not even the biggest problem. Like Aaron Nola, for me, if you have to power rank what happened, kind of a little disappointing. But for 5 innings, he was pretty good. And I'll just say it. Do you know how hard it is to pitch, especially as a starting pitcher, when you have 0 margin for error because you know that your offense can't do shit?
Right.
It is almost impossible. And those guys all stepped up. Nola to a lesser degree. But Ranger Suarez yesterday gave you everything he had. Everything he had. Yeah. Yeah. He manned up. He sacked up, and nobody could feed off of that. Guys make pitches. Baseball, there is a thing about momentum and emotion, and it's real within the framework of a game. You should be fired up when you see Ranger Suarez, who's been bad for 3 months, just go out there and really bear down in a key moment. You should feed off of that. And they couldn't. They couldn't muster it. And that's what's surprising to me. If you would have told me that Ranger Suarez would pitch into the 5th inning, keep the opponent scoreless, say this thing's coming back to Philly, because quite clearly they would be fired up over Ranger Suarez stepping up in that moment. That bullpen, the thing that someone said, are you really surprised? Or I know on the recent show, someone DM'd me and they're like, on the recent show, I know you kind of pivoted and went Phillies, but you and Anthony's son weeks ago were like, this is going to happen. This is what you were afraid of. Take your victory lap. And I'm like, no. Because I think when it came down to it, I chose to believe that this team would, and I bought that storyline, learn from their mistakes last year, understand the pitchers who were good, and you have to, and they did tip their caps to Mets pitchers. Great. They were good. But you have to understand what the opponent's doing to you. And opponents have been doing this to them for weeks. And I just thought that in the key moment, when the lights came on, that they would adjust and do enough to give some offense. Not terribly surprised that the bats went cold. A little bit surprised. I am stunned, absolutely stunned by what we saw from this Phillies bullpen this postseason. Perhaps you and I both overrated this group. I thought with the depth, the versatility of the bullpen, that pessimistically, this was a top 10 unit. Pessimistically. I think realistically, it was a top 5 unit. And I think some baseball evaluators would have told you it was one of the 3 best bullpens in baseball, maybe one of the 4 best bullpens in baseball. They recorded 38 outs over 4 games and allowed 28 base runners. Jeff Hoffman was a disaster. And he was not helped by his manager, I did not think, yesterday.
No,
and I thought
yesterday,
his
for sure, yesterday.
Post-game answer, and credit to Destiny Legardo and Marcus. I don't know how many reporters were in there, but they were peppering him post-game, Rob Thompson. But Jeff Hoffman was a disaster in this series. Matt Strahm, a disaster. Orion Kirkering was horrible.
Yeah.
Estevez, terrible.
Yeah,
terrible.
I don't know. So the Hoffman thing yesterday. So you get him up. He warms up 3 times, which he's never happened, right? Not to mention that he's warmed up 3 times early in a game. Now, he said he was prepared for it. They probably discussed it. They probably told him, if Ranger gets in trouble early, you're our guy, especially if it's, Alonso down, because you got all righties in the lineup. So he knew it was inevitable that it could happen, or it was possible that it could happen. But then he comes in and he does his job. Like in the 5th inning, he saves Ranger, and he comes in, he strikes out Alonso, gets Iglesias that weak tap out in front of the home plate, and you go, good job, Jeff Hoffman. You're sitting there at that point. I'm saying to myself, game 1 was probably an anomaly. It was a game that happened. He came out, did his job here in a tough spot, tough environment, protected that 1-run lead. Good work, especially after warming up 3 times. Then he goes and sits on the bench. And this is the thing, I don't think enough people made enough of this. Yeah. I might be the only one, and maybe I'm crazy. But that top of the 6th was a very long top of the 6th, because the Mets changed pitchers twice. Harper leads off with the double. That gets Quintana out of the game.
So it had to at least be 20-plus minutes.
Right? That gets him, I don't know what the exact time was, but that gets him out of the game. Then they bring in Reed Garrett. Reed Garrett strikes out 2 batters and walks a batter. Both batters he struck out went full. So you had 3 long at-bats. Then they replace Garrett, right? So you have 2 pitching changes. All the while, nobody is warming up in that bullpen. Nobody. Even if your thought is, I'm going back to Jeff Hoffman no matter what, you have to have somebody ready. And it could be Estevez. It could very well be Estevez, and that's fine. But you have to have somebody ready, because if he comes out and he doesn't look the same, you can't keep throwing him. And he gives up the hit, and then it's wild pitch, hit by pitch, wild pitch, walk.
He's got to be out of the. I mean, he's got to be out of the game at the latest by the hit by pitch.
But you've got to get him out. And that's the problem. Maybe you don't even get to Lindor in that inning.
Yeah.
Right? With the bases loaded. If you get Hoffman out, or you're ready to get Hoffman out earlier, that falls on the manager and the pitching coach, but both. But the manager, he's at the top of, he's the head of the snake. So you gotta put it on him. That's on them.
It was, it's another elimination game where the way that the game was navigated from a tactical standpoint, it felt too passive. And, after the game, he talks about Christopher Sanchez. Well, we were only going to use him. We were only going to use him if it had gone extras or an emergency situation. Look, I'm watching that bullpen. You have to have a little bit of a feel for your team. And to Rob's credit, for a while, I think he had a really good feel for it. In this series, I felt like I don't know if he was blinded by loyalty. I don't know if he was blinded by this confidence. This team has put Rob Thompson on the map from a national perspective. They've given Rob the opportunity to become, like, not that to say that he's become something, but he's always kind of been in the background. Rob Thompson is now one of the better known managers in the sport. So as a human being, you thank your team for that. A lot of these guys have helped sort of catapult him into the national conscience of a baseball audience. I think that he significantly overvalued what he had when it was time to make these key decisions. There was just too much trust. You can show too much trust in August. You can't show too much trust when your season is on the line. And I thought in that case, he absolutely did. I'll tell you what I thought was really strange too. You get the ball from Bohm down the line, and I know that you can't overturn that. Like, why don't you just go out there and show that you're like awake? Like it was like Sleepy Rob yesterday is what I felt like we were watching. I really truly I like Rob. I think that overall he's done a good job. I think that we probably should note that he does run. I believe he runs a tight ship. Like this idea that there's zero accountability and that Rob just sits there and goes, no, I think that that's untrue. I think that he brings guys into the office, and when he doesn't like something or he sees something, he probably lets them know about it. I mean, I know that to be true, at least in a couple isolated cases. Now, it might not show up with playing time and being benched and things like that. That's where I think he says, like, well, look, I'm going to address this one way on an adult level. We'll go play now. But I thought Rob was bad in this series. I do not think that they will be. I do not think I would be shocked. I know this is one of the big talking points on the radio today. Will they fire Rob Thompson? I guess I'd be very surprised at that. No, I don't think that they should. I know that a lot of our listeners want blood right now, and I understand it. This is not high school baseball where the manager dictates plate approach. This is not high school baseball where you're saying this is how you must swing. It's just not the way it works. You have an entire analytics department that cultivates the environment in which these players, get into their approaches. You heard a couple guys say it, like, I'm built to be aggressive. This is how I compete. This is how I thrive. This is what got me here. Both Trey Turner and Alec Boehm had talked about being very aggressive and how that works for them. Or in this case, did not work for them. That isn't the manager, guys. Like, I'm sorry. Like, if you want to move on from Rob Thompson because you can cite past examples of coaches, managers getting a team so far and then not being able to get them over the hump, that's fine. Like, I have no problem with that. You want to move on from Rob because of that reason? Okay. But like, in terms of like, if you think that like a new manager is going to make like Trey Turner choke up on the bat and shoot to right field all the time, like, that's not going to happen. So, if that's what you're hoping is going to happen, you can just, flush that.
Yeah, I don't think he's going anywhere. I mean, he's under contract for 2 more years. He's got at least 25. He's going to give it another shot. Look, we're going to sit here and talk about, kind of do like a little look ahead to the, what this offseason might bring. But the reality of it is that, and they're not going to exactly run it back like they did last year, right? Like, last year to this year was a total run it back. There's going to be change, but not as much change as maybe people are screaming for. And that starts 100% with the manager. He's not going to go anywhere. So get used to it. Philly Rob, we may not call him that anymore, but he's still going to be here running this team. And he's going to be given into 25. Do I think that the leash got a little bit shorter? I do. But it was so long to begin with that it's probably back to normal level now, right? It's not. You're not keeping him right by your hip, ready to cut that leash, at the end when it's time to just say goodbye. It's not there yet, but it's probably back to where it normally would be for a manager going into his third full year, right?
Yeah, and I think that's entirely fair. I mean, this is the second straight postseason where when things go wrong, and one thing I'll say, I guess this is the way I'll defend him, is that when you have an entire bullpen that's just not getting anybody out, it's very hard to know, hey, if this guy's throwing the way that he should, I feel good about this matchup in this spot, or this is how I would handle it. And I think that Rob was playing off of the 5 months of information, the greater picture, than he was in what was happening in the moment. Like, it was clear that Jeff Hoffman wasn't that guy. I don't know, man. Look, here's what I'll say. Wasn't that guy in that moment, I should say. And I don't know what's going to happen with Jeff Hoffman this offseason. I don't know if what happened in this series changes the math on what he's going to earn, whether the Phillies would be the team to give it to him. That's a different conversation for a different day. What I do want to point out, 2 things that were pretty obvious. The team didn't do enough at the trade deadline. And I have 2 thoughts on this, and I'm curious to know what you think. They had holes. These were holes that we talked about in March, and they were evident by the time the end of July rolled around. And it's funny to me that Johan Rojas, we sat here about a year ago talking about how Johan Rojas just can't be a meaningful part of a team with championship aspirations. He's not ready. Maybe he will be one day, but right now he's not. And we assumed that they were going to make a correction over the offseason and go in a different direction in center field to provide a little bit more offensive punch, given what we had watched unfold in the postseason last year. And then all of a sudden it never happened. And then all the stories get written and their messaging is that, well, Johan's actually ready for this. Like we're ready to go with Johan Rojas. He's actually been our center fielder all along, which I don't believe. I think that they probably did explore other avenues and just couldn't find the right one for what they felt was the right one. Then it becomes painfully obvious that he's overmatched. So much so that they go out and they acquire Austin Hayes, and then they basically tell you that Brandon Marsh in center and Austin Hayes in left, it's going to kind of be the path forward. That Austin Hayes is an everyday guy. Maybe Brandon Marsh takes a lot of Johan Rojas' playing time until Austin Hayes wasn't good and then hurt and then sick, and Brandon Marsh regressed. Hit 231 post All-Star break, by the way, Brandon Marsh. 33% strikeout rate. I want to talk a little bit about him in further detail in a moment. So then Johan Rojas becomes your center fielder again. And this thing is chapping my ass. This sentiment that, well, how can you blame Johan Rojas? Like, Johan Rojas isn't the problem. He's there for his defense. My counter
which also took a step back this year, by the way.
My counter is like it's nothing personal with Johan Rojas. It's if your offense is struggling and you know that there's a boom or bust component in it, and you're not going to be able to shake that DNA because it's a bunch of veteran guys who are dug in. You have to do things to mitigate that elsewhere. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying you need to go out and get a 40 home run thumper, but you need a player, maybe a lower ceiling player that has a different approach, that brings a different dynamic to the team. Not a free swinging, 240 hitting guy who can't walk, who has the exact same approach, but is far less valuable. Like, this is not a mediocre hitter. This is a flat out bad major league hitter. There were here you go. I had to double check it to make sure I had it right. There were 112 outfielders this season that had at least 300 plate appearances. Of those 112 outfielders, Johan Rojas ranked 108th in OPS. You look at the batting at, oh man, Johan Rojas hits 240 for you. Like, you fucking take that all day. No, you don't, because he doesn't walk.
Right.
And he has no sense of how to play the game. He can't bunt. He can't move runners. He provides you nothing offensively. You can't just write that off. And like when you're talking about winning a championship, you can't just write off an entire slot in your lineup and say, well, you got all these guys that are making all this money. They should carry the offense. Fine. That doesn't. Two things can be true. Those guys should do more to carry the offense. That doesn't mean you can just get away with having an absolute zero in a lineup. Doesn't work.
So, Bob, I love when you get all frothy, but I agree with you. And as a matter of fact, I have a story that got published on Pattison talking about how the Phillies' failure this year starts at the top of the organization and works its way down. And we could sit here and criticize Johan Rojas, the player, all we want. And everything you said is absolutely true. But we knew this problem existed a year ago. We knew that they had issues in the outfield in October of 23. We knew that the bullpen needed improvement in October of 23. We knew that the bench needed improvement in October of 23. Dave Dombrowski went out and brought in, and his team, Sam falls into it too, but again, head of the snake, Dave Dombrowski. But everybody in that organization that's a decision maker, scouts and all. The Phillies had 18 players this year who played for them that did not play in 2023. 4 of them were already in the system, and 14 were brought in either via trade or signed as a free agent. If I had to say to you, Bob, who had the best WAR of those 18 players? Who do you think it was?
Cal Stevenson.
No.
Nah, go ahead.
There was one guy that actually was useful for a little bit. Spencer Turnbull.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
1.2 WAR he had.
There you go.
He was 1.2. The 18 of them combined had 1.4 WAR.
Yeah.
So the best player that the Phillies brought in some capacity via trade or free agency, either coming into the season or during the season, was a guy who hasn't pitched since January 25th or June 25th and was pulled out of the rotation for Taijuan Walker.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. It was all about marginal improvement. And they needed more than marginal improvement. You know, you look at some other guys on that list, you know, Estevez was okay, but not great, right? And we kind of knew, we talked about this.
Everything about his season screamed regression is coming.
Yeah. I mean,
if you were bullish on him, you were just believing that the run would continue. But everything pointed to this guy is okay. He's fine. He's not a bad piece, but he is not the piece that puts you over the top. Correct. Hey, you're the guy that we need one more bullet that in the biggest moment we feel that you're it. And there's nothing about his makeup that says that he is that guy. And boy, did that play itself out last night.
Yeah. And the third best guy was your favorite, Jose Ruiz, 0.5.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's why I'm most upset is that I don't get to watch him pitch again this season.
But and then you brought up Austin Hayes, who was not good.
I actually hope to never. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if he's on the team next year, and like maybe he turns into a useful player. I don't want to. I don't. He's
arbitration eligible, so it's possible that he's on the team. But he was worth negative 0.3 WAR, which is worse than Whit Merrifield. They would have been better off.
You downgraded. You might as well just keep Whit Merrifield. Yep.
They would have been better off keeping Whit Merrifield.
So what you had here, and this is where I want to ask you this question, really like galaxy brain stuff here. You go out and your two big splashes for this team are a late inning reliever who can't miss bats and a guy who at best was a platoon piece, but that you tried to sell a fan base as being an everyday guy. And there was nothing, and go back to our post-deadline podcast, and I said it right away. I said, there's nothing about this player that says this is an everyday guy. There's no evidence of that whatsoever. It was a weird sell. I don't know why they did that. That all said, it was very clear they needed more. I think in the moment, it felt like they needed more. And I'm kind of curious, if you're in that clubhouse, do you interpret that as, they're not really going all in here? And do you like lose a little steam because of that? Or did you really believe as a veteran player in that clubhouse, all right, well, we are good enough and this is fine. Like, thanks, Dave. You gave us the pieces we need. I'm kind of curious about that. And I don't know that we'll ever get an answer to it, but what I'd like you to speculate on is this. Is there any possibility? Now, we didn't have the evidence of August and September to continue to show us that this team was like kind of mediocre, really, for like multiple months. We had really only had about 3 weeks of it. And that's why I can't really buy into this theory. But is there like a world where you think that they were like, look, this core is super flawed. And though we are in a good spot right now, we are not willing to trade meaningful pieces because we know in a very short period of time, we're going to have to do some pretty substantial things. And some of these younger guys might be a part of it. Like, not that they didn't believe that this wasn't the year that they couldn't win a championship, but it was like a hedge where they're like, this is not the all-in team. Like, we aren't one big piece away. Like, we aren't a Mason Miller away. Like, do you think that they kind of were like, this core, like, or am I just giving them, would that be giving them too much benefit of the doubt?
You gave me two really big questions there. So let's tackle them one at a time. The first one that you asked was how do you think the players reacted to them not doing a lot at the deadline? And I will tell you that they were just fine with what was the way it was done. And the reason I believe that is because they overvalued themselves. And JT Realmuto said it last night. He said, we know we weren't playing our best ball at the end of the regular season, but we thought we were just going to be able to flip the switch when we got to October, and we didn't flip it. Right? So they were of the mindset, top to bottom, we're good. Don't worry. We know when the important games are. We'll get there. And when we get there, we'll show you how good we are. And then they didn't. So I don't think that the players, by any stretch of the imagination, were like, oh, we need this, we need that.
So do you think, let me just stop you there, though. So then for people that are like, I want Rob Thompson's head on a stake, is that Rob's fault? Like, should there have been more drilling? Was there more drilling? We don't really know the answer to this, but should there have been more drilling to be like, yo, you guys aren't good enough to just flip a switch. You guys aren't good enough to ignore all of these line graphs that are showing your chase rates just get out of absolute control. You guys aren't good enough to ignore the reality that the sport has figured out that you will get yourselves out. And Trey Turner talked to that. Like, they had to have known that, right? Like, that's the thing that I found interesting. Like, credit to Sean Manaea, crossfire, arm slot, added a little extra velo. Sean Manaea is a nice arm. Jose Quintana was a really good in September and onward. Like, these guys aren't bums. But what got me was that they had a very clear and obvious game plan. Opposing pitchers for about 2 months have had a very clear and obvious game plan against the Phillies, one which was laid out for everybody to see in the back half of that Arizona series. Talent will sometimes just take over, and I think that they were able to overcome that in spurts when you have 40 games. But in an isolated high-pressure series where everything's a little bit tighter, it's like, that is a failure. That's someone's failure that you couldn't get it home to these guys how they were going to be pitched to, and that they weren't going to be able to just turn it on, and that they aren't as good as they think they are.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you. I mean, there's blame for everybody here. I mean, very few people come out of this blameless, and so I think that it's fair to say that. I mean, that goes to Kevin Long. He's not going anywhere either. There's people who want to fire Kevin Long. Trust me,
there are people that think it's obvious that he will be fired.
I don't think so. I don't think so a little bit. So, and the reason why I say that, Bob, look, we've already had this conversation before. Thank you to the fire truck flying by. That the Phillies are going to at least try to be players in the Juan Soto sweepstakes this offseason. Now, there are a lot of people who believe that the two New York teams are going to be the two that are going to be battling it out for his services. And that very well may be the case, and the Phillies might be on the outside looking in. But he's got a good relationship with players on this team. We know that. But more than that, he has a very close relationship with Kevin Long. If you're going to recruit Juan Soto and you have Kevin Long here, that's a big recruitment tool, right? So you're not moving on from Kevin Long is not going to get fired if you're thinking about going out and spending $500 million on another superstar player. So I'm just telling you right now, Kevin Long's not going anywhere. At least not right now. He's not. If these hitting struggles continue into next season, could there be a change at that point? Sure, maybe. I could see that. But right now, he's not going to be fired, and he's going to be part of this organization to start the 2025 season. So that ain't happening. The second part of what you asked about was, maybe from a higher level, did Dombrowski and Fuld and the rest of the brass look at it and say, hey, we're a flawed team. We shouldn't move on from these younger prospects. The one thing I can tell you is that they went, we know this now. I mean, it's been widely reported that they went hard after Garrett Crochet from the White Sox. It didn't get done, and it didn't get done because Crochet didn't want to move to the bullpen. And that was the idea. Like, the Phillies looked at it and said, we'll let Crochet be like another pitcher for the rest of the regular season. But since he's on a quote unquote innings limit, when we get to the playoffs, he's going to be, a fireballer that we can go to in late in games. Like they really believed that that's how they could have bolstered their bullpen even more, right? That was their target. And so going into that conversation with the White Sox, right? And you're going after Garrett Crochet. You know that he's under contract, he's still under contract for another year. You know that he's going to cost you a lot. To engage in that conversation, you had to be willing to give up something. So knowing that, I can't sit here and say that they were like, we're flawed. We're not going to give up our better prospects. But maybe sometimes, that the old adage is sometimes the best trade you make is the one that you don't make. And that could be the case when we analyze it and say they're going to need Aiden Miller soon. They're going to need Justin Crawford soon. They're going to need Andrew Painter soon. Those guys being here gives you flexibility to do other things now that if you traded one or two of them in July and then still lost, you wouldn't have that flexibility. So I don't think that they looked at it that way. I think it just turned out to be that way, if that makes sense.
Do you want to play the blame game? Do you want to vent a little bit about some individual guys here?
Go ahead. No, let's play. There's plenty of it to go around.
Can I give you a thought? And it has nothing to do with this player's dismal offensive approach or his lack of production at the plate in this series. It was at the middle innings. There's a ground ball to shortstop. And the player flips the ball to Bryson Stott. He almost flips it over his head.
Mm-hmm.
Just give me a second here. So I think in that moment that play tells you all there needs to be said about a guy and the way that he is mentally dialed into a game. He clutched that ball too tight. He hung on to it too long. He's thinking about everything he's doing. He's not playing the game naturally. He's not if I were sitting behind someone, right? If I were throwing batting practice, as a coach, I was horrendous at throwing batting practice. Now I have a decent arm. I feel pretty good about it. I could get on a mound actually and still throw the ball. And you'd be like, all right, for a 39-year-old guy, that looks okay. Standing behind an L screen about 40 feet away from someone, I have no idea where that ball's going. It's totally mental, right? I feel like that Trey Turner in that moment showed you exactly what's happening to him at the plate as well. I don't know if it's about justifying the contract, wanting to win so badly that you get outside yourself. You're trying to do too much, as Rob likes to say all the time. But what I do know is that, it's not Trey Turner's fault that they gave him $27 million plus per year for 11 years and $300 million contract. But 3 for 15 with 5 strikeouts and 0 extra base hits and absolutely minimal impact. I know he had a couple of bats that were key in the Phillies winning game 2. But when you're paying a player that much money, you expect them to be a difference maker, not a pass the baton guy. At bare minimum, he should be a pass the baton guy. What you're really paying for there is true difference making, playmaking ability. And it was none of it. And he had his moments this season. You look at him, he hit over 290. The OPS was a little north of 800. It was an okay year, not a terrible year. Missed some time, came back hot. But this guy has not been to date an impact player for the Phillies. I don't know if the contract's a mistake. It feels like a mistake. I don't know where he's going to play defensively after next season. I think that if at best you can get one more year out of him at shortstop, I probably wouldn't. I would think about alternative paths forward immediately. But there's a day coming very soon where he's not going to be a shortstop. So now you're paying for a left fielder maybe with an 800 OPS, a second baseman whose skills are either diminishing or he can't handle the pressure of Philadelphia. I don't know what we're looking at here. But Trey Turner was a disaster in this series and very much near the top of my list of guys who I'm most disappointed in, because I thought there were a couple times he came to the plate in some key spots. I said, you know what? This guy's going to pop one because he can be that guy. And he just wasn't. He just was not. And I don't know what you make of it. I don't know if it's stubbornness on the approach, understanding what pitchers are trying to do to him and just saying, I just refuse to adjust my game because I can make a difference. I can be a playmaker if I continue to dive and sell out and be ultra aggressive. I thought he was I thought he was pathetic in this series.
He is probably the biggest disappointment of any player this postseason. And that's saying something considering there were guys who were over.
Yeah, considering the team as a whole hit 185 and the numbers would be sub 140 if you remove Nick Castellanos and Bryce Harper.
Yeah. So he's certainly most disappointing. And I have a hard time trying to figure out why he got this. He was this way. And maybe you're right. Maybe it's a can't handle this pressure thing. And if that's the case, then you're stuck. You're in trouble.
Well, that's the thing. There's no, so what do you do about it? What do you do?
Yeah.
What you do about it is you hopefully get better players that can handle the moment, and you can hide him a little bit more, because he looks to me like a guy that needs to be hidden a little bit. Like a guy who over the course of 162, you like look at the back of the baseball card and like he'll get his numbers and like he can help you win games. But when the lights go on, like, come on, buddy.
He strikes me as a guy who can be really good for you if he doesn't have to be one of your guys, one of your dudes, right? Like as long as if he can be fourth or fifth on your pecking order instead of second or third in your pecking order, he's a much better player.
Right.
I think there's a lot more pressure on him to be number 2 behind Bryce, and he doesn't fit that bill. As for the defense, you're right. Like, I would make the change right away. I think you got to flip him and Stott for next year, assuming that's your keystone combination. I would flip them, even though Stott's a Gold Glove caliber second baseman and not a Gold Glove caliber shortstop. But I think Turner is so bad at shortstop that the trade-off is worth it.
It's a disaster. I don't want to read any stories next February about you ground balls every day. Nobody works harder. Like, okay, yeah, that's fine. Like, and I appreciate that.
Tim Kelly asked him about it after the game last night. And Turner, you could tell that he doesn't like being asked about it, because he said, we talked about this. You and I talked about this a month ago. Like he literally brought that up in front of everybody and say that he talked to Tim Kelly about this a month ago. But he said that he feels like his defense got a lot better in the second half of the season. And maybe he cut down on his errors a little bit. Maybe. But there's nothing that makes you sit there and go, oh, this is a good defensive shortstop for next season. Yeah. We go into the season with this. It's fine. But they may go another year.
If they do. I mean, I can sit here and say you should. And I know a lot of people feel that way, but it doesn't mean that they will. I mean, I think that there's like, you also don't want to admit, hey, we paid all this money to Trey Turner shortstop. And then all of a sudden he becomes Trey Turner second baseman or Trey Turner left fielder, which is where I would actually start to think about, if you can't improve your outfield next season via free agency.
Yeah.
You got 2 big holes out there right now.
Yep.
So,
but then it creates another hole at shortstop.
So then go out and get a shortstop that can hit a ball up the middle with 2 strikes, and pay him $2 million a year. I would have died to have Jose Iglesias on this team, which is like, I cannot believe I just said that. I mean,
you know what?
Seriously, I'm not one of these guys. Like, I'm not going to do the Ruben Amaro thing where like analytics ruin baseball and launch angle. Like, I'm not that guy. Like, that's the sport. Fine. Teams win. Teams have won being very analytical and hitting a lot of home runs. Like, okay.
Castellanos actually, it's funny to, everybody talks about Lindor. And there's no question Lindor was the best player on the Mets this year. But Castellanos talked about that last night, about how Iglesias was the guy who brought that team together and got them playing the right way. And like I don't know if it's a friendship thing that he has with him from when they were in Detroit. I don't even know if were they in Detroit together? I think they were, right? But the point of it is that like he gave all the credit in the world to Iglesias for what the Mets have become. So it's interesting that you said what you said. Probably can't play shortstop like he used to, but you would almost take what he gives you production wise and mediocre short. Like if that's what you were getting production wise out of Trey Turner, you'd settle for the mediocrity at shortstop, right? Defensively.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the problem. But yeah, Turner was number one on the hit list of disappointments for the Phillies in this postseason.
I believe it was Alex Coffey in 22 who coined the daycare name, right?
Yeah.
Is she the one that wrote the story? No offense to her, great writer. It was really fun, good story for a couple of years. So what I'm about to say has nothing to do with her. I never want to hear the term daycare ever again.
It's over.
It's over. So far over. I want to talk about these three because obviously, as you turn the page to next season, I think that there's a blend of yes, there are going to be some changes, and some of them might not be as obvious. You are locked into pretty substantial deals. So, like, while you might want to turn the page on JT Realmuto next season, like that's not going to happen. We've talked about the possibility of maybe exploring a deal for Castellanos. Post April 30th, had a pretty decent year. He acquitted himself nicely in the playoffs. Is there somebody that would take him for $30 million over 2 years? Maybe, yeah. I'm actually
you're gonna have to buy that down a little bit if you trade him.
What's that?
You're gonna have to buy his contract down.
We have to buy it down a little bit, right? Yeah, exactly. I don't know that you'd even want to trade him. Like, why would you want to trade him? He was the one of a handful of guys in this postseason run, or if you want to call it that, who actually showed some marbles. So, okay, like he's probably not going anywhere, I guess. Kyle Schwarber, probably not going anywhere. 1 year left, $20 million or thereabouts. So there's only, you're pretty locked in. Nobody's taking Trey Turner's contract. Bryce Harper's not going anywhere. So what are you going to do? So you have two spots in the outfield right now, both in left and center field. You have to address them. You have to address them in some capacity. And then in the infield, I've said it now for a couple of weeks. I don't believe, and this isn't any Monday morning quarterback thing. I've been saying this for 3 months. I don't believe that Stott and Bohm both work in this infield, given the declining production of your key players. I don't think there's enough pop in this lineup. I know that we're talking about approach, be able to string together singles and how it's infuriating. This team can't do it, but there's just not enough offensive punch, I don't think, in this lineup, even for a team that was fifth in runs scored and at one point in July led baseball in runs per game. So where are you going to change? You go to the outfield. There was this idea that Brandon Marsh was going to take the next step and become an everyday player. That did not happen this year. So here's where I'm at right now. I would at best, strictly view Brandon Marsh as a platoon guy. There's no projection about taking a next step for me with him at this point. I would move on from him. He's still relatively cheap. And so for that reason, like if he's back here, which he might be, probably will be, fine. But I think you've seen the best of him. I really do. Mm-hmm. And like, I think he's a great dude. I know he's a good teammate. He's done some nice things for this team. I just think that sometimes you overvalue the memories. And I just don't think that this guy is going to be what they had hoped he might turn into. Bryson Stott, huge step back this season. Now, middle infielder playing second base. I don't know if he's clutch. I'm not sure if that's reality or not. I still think that there's something there with him. So I would not turn the page on Bryson Stott. Alec Boehm, I would 100% move on from. And it hurts me to say that, in that what this team really does need more of is someone that's willing to use all fields, that will go to the gap. Ironically, one of the best swings of the entire series was the one where Alec Boehm got thrown out going into second base. He went the other way and shot a gap. Hell yeah. I don't know what we saw. These are probably two separate conversations. We can probably do Boehm a little bit more in depth, given whatever the hell he was showing in this series and what he's shown for the last 2 months. But I'm good on Brandon Marsh. I'm good on Alec Boehm. I'm curious where you land on those three players, because if you're going to make changes, these are the guys that are up for discussion.
You know how there's on the internets, on the interwebs, we always have people posting, who are the three, your three guys, your three people, three this.
Our
one
brand
that you
just changed mid-show here. We're
No,
green.
I'm not going to go too far here, but
no, I'm saying like, literally on YouTube, like someone just changed our. I guess they're doing crossing broadcast, so they just changed over our colors and stuff.
Like I just noticed that.
Crossed up is now covering the Eagles. Just to be aware of that.
Yeah, that's fine. That's funny. Anyway, you know how there's those three things. It's like, stay, go, whatever.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yep.
They're all different kinds of little games that people play on social media. So you're taking these three guys. I'm of the mindset of Bryson Stott stays. I think that there's still a lot that he can bring to the table still, despite the bad year. I think that he's got greater value. He's got the most value to the team, to the Phillies, of the three. I think Alec Boehm has the most value to the team in a trade. Mm-hmm. So he goes. Like I'm of the mindset that you trade Alec Boehm, get something in return.
So are you with me? You don't think he'll be back here next year?
I don't think he'll be back here next year. What is Russ doing?
Yeah, I don't know what these guys are doing. They got to figure it out. Like I think they're like in our show. I don't know if you can run two shows at the same time, but like they need to figure that out.
He's a riot. Anyway, and then the third one is Marsh. And I look at Marsh and say one of two things. I'm fine keeping Brandon Marsh if he's your fourth outfielder. As you identify, you recognize he's no longer an everyday guy. He shouldn't be one of your three. But if he's your fourth outfielder, I'm okay with it. Yeah, because he's
that's
okay.
Fine. He's a usable player. Like I'm not sitting here and saying Brandon Marsh sucks or anything like that.
Right.
What I'm saying though is like you are going to have to make structural changes here.
But
there's only so many you can make.
But if another team that you're talking to says, "Oh, we think Brandon could be an everyday player for us," see you later.
Yeah,
go ahead, make that trade, because he's not an everyday guy here. And if you can get something of good value for him, because somebody else thinks that they can make him an everyday outfielder, because he's young and affordable, good, go ahead.
Yeah,
that's what I mean by the changes. Like I think that there's going to be changes to this core, and I think there's maybe one or two. Nothing significant, like you pointed out. The guys with the contracts probably aren't going anywhere. So where do you fix the team? And you have to move on from these guys. And so, like, I would not be surprised if it's Alec Boehm and Brandon Marsh are somewhere else next year. Even though Alec Boehm told us yesterday he knows where he's going to be next year.
Thought I liked Tim. That was Tim that asked that question, correct?
Yeah.
Were you standing there when that question was asked?
Standing right there, yeah.
Yeah, I thought like Tim. I feel like sometimes the Phillies players don't love the questions Tim asks, but I thought it was a great question. I thought it was a valid question, and I felt like he had a level of annoyance, at the question. And like the fact of the matter is, like his career is at a crossroads, and I think it is very possible that he is not back here next year.
Yeah,
we will see. All right, real quick. They do not have any minor league reinforcements that would be ready for opening day, correct?
I guess Andrew.
Like, Painter. Are we doing like Andrew Painter, like on a program?
So that I guess the question that you have to figure out if you're the Phillies is it worth having him up at the start of the year and then limit his innings, or do you let him start the year in the minors where you only make him go 2 innings to start, 3 innings to start, and then you call him up at a point where it's like, okay, now we can use him at his fullness, right? So that's the only question. So,
and honestly, that might fit. I mean, you're talking about a guy. It's not just pure innings limit. You're still talking about a guy who is working his way back. Now, obviously, he's going to throw in the Arizona Fall League, and he'll get some time there. But like a slower ramp up, a more conservative ramp up, would maybe allow you to get those innings in a more meaningful capacity the second half of the year and possibly into the playoffs. and buy him a little extra time where you're being extra cautious.
You going to watch that AFL debut on Saturday online?
Yeah, he better be good because we need something here, right?
But to answer that question, I don't think Aiden Miller's ready.
Yeah.
I mean, possibly late in 25, maybe he gets there. But I think he's more of a 26. I think there's a chance that Justin Crawford gets a look. Not opening day. I don't think he's opening day, but I do think at some point, relatively early, first half of the season, I do think Justin Crawford gets a look in the major league level, even though he's still only 20 years old.
Yeah, I mean, look, one other thing too on Alec Bohm, this is an important part of the consideration. He went to arbitration this year. I believe he made giving him $4 million.
And I think if he goes to arbitration,
they haven't penciled in around like $8.1 million. He's getting expensive now too. So it's not relative. This isn't a $760,000 contract anymore. I guess this will be 26 is his final year of arbitration. He's
got two more. He's got two more eligible arbitration.
I don't think that they're going to do another deal with him. So to me, that's where it's like, now's probably the time to pull the cord.
And here's the other thing, Bob. He's already 28. People think he's younger than he is. He's already 28. So this is, when you say a baseball player enters their prime years are usually 28 to 32, 28 to 33, right? I mean, that's usually your prime. Like, he's there now. He's in his prime. Like, this is when you move him, because if you try and hang on to him for 2 more years and then say, okay, now we're going to move on from Alec Bohm at age 30, what does a 30-year-old player who hits 280 and hits 15 home runs get you in the free market?
Yeah, that's where I just say, look, you got a 28-year-old, you get him kind of cheap here. You can have him for 2 years under team control. Right. He can help you win, or you could try to see if there's any more to unlock there. We've kind of done what we can. He hit 44 doubles this year. He would have led the National League in doubles had he not gotten hurt. It was great. Look, awesome. Yeah. And I think that there are some things you can sell there in a trade. So I think that that's also part of the consideration as well. Let's see.
But how much more? But let me ask you this, because this is the one thing we didn't talk about. I mean, let's remember, he did not play game 2. He was not in the lineup for game 2.
Yeah.
And the reason he was not in the lineup for game 2 was because they don't like his attitude on the field. That's what, he wasn't hitting. And if he was hitting, they would probably suck it up and deal with the attitude issue. Right. But the fact is he wasn't hitting and he had a bad attitude. And this is something that has cropped up multiple times in the past. Is that also part of the reason that the Phillies think that they need to move on from him?
It should be. That's one of the reasons I would. I thought that how he behaved at multiple points, especially late in the season, was borderline embarrassing.
Yeah.
I thought he embarrassed himself. I really do. Yeah, I mean, I don't really know how else to say it. I mean, I almost like want to let there be 3 seconds of silence after I say it, because I think it needs emphasis. I thought he embarrassed himself and was a bad look for the team. So that would also be part of it. And you can be frustrated all you want, or want to win, or perform on a big stage, and you have a contract 2 years away and you're trying to cash in, $80 million. There's probably a lot of pressure he's placing on himself, but he acted like a baby. No, you're not going to say that. You got to go back in there. But
no, but I think that the attitude issue is part of it. Like, I think that has to be part of the decision making here.
I didn't love what he had to say after the game last night either.
No, I didn't either.
Not that he was like totally dismissive, but like he did say on 2 separate occasions, he ended his comments with "it is what it is."
Yeah.
And like, I don't want to. Nobody wants to hear "it is what it is" about your own game, your own postseason, the team's final destination. Like, it is what it is. I think he gets it sometimes. Like, I think he gets it, but doesn't really want to accept it. Correct. Like, hey, these people are nuts. They're all critical. Like, this is a hard game. You don't play it. I do. Like, we all know that, buddy. Like, we do. Like, we all know baseball's a hard sport. You're not going to be perfect all the time. But I think that he's a guy that goes, I understand. And then, what he reminds me of? He reminds me of a high school kid who's looking a teacher in the eye and going, yeah. And then turns around and goes, that's what he reminds me of.
You're not wrong. You're 100% right. You're 100% right. Yeah, and so I think that that's part of it. I think that has to play into it. We're looking at the positive reasons to move on from him. Like, here's all the good things that he can offer another team, but I think internally they're looking at it like, yeah, I mean, this is, we continue to deal with a teenager in the adult room of a major league clubhouse, right? Like, that's what it really. I think that they have to feel that way a little bit.
I feel like they need another energy guy in there. Like, so there's two things I want to talk about. I want to talk a little bit about clubhouse dynamics, and then if you want to have anything else, then I want to just talk about Juan Soto. Like, because I think everyone's like, ooh, do they think that they're going to get Juan Soto?
Yeah.
So clubhouse dynamics, we know like Garrett Stubbs is like, chief vibes officer. And I know a lot of people like want to just move on from Garrett Stubbs because for whatever reason, like his, the playlist and the dancing on my own, like a lot of that is representative of like this group and this idea that everyone bought into, that they were like special and different. And now the ticket didn't cash. And so all of that anger has to go different places. And then some of it, I think, gets misdirected to him. He did not have a great year, but he was not bad. And if you look around the sport, not bad for what he was asked to do, I should say.
Right.
You look around the sport, there's not a ton of great backup catchers who are super productive offensively. That aside, I don't think that Garrett Stubbs can be like the vibes guy anymore. Like, not just like, you need a more meaningful piece, I feel like, to bring energy to the clubhouse. And one thing I will say, having been in there, is that I did think that the feeling was a little bit different this year. It didn't, not that they didn't love each other, didn't want to play for one another or any of that, but like, I thought that clubhouse, I used the phrase tired a couple times, right? And I just feel like that their overall energy at times dwindled. And I do wonder if you need like an infusion, a different perspective, a different character, somebody that might have a little bit more of a meaningful role on the team to infuse a little different vibe, a little different, emotional element to the mix. And I'm curious to know what you think about that.
Yeah, and so I agree with you. And it's funny, you mentioned earlier how you wish that the Phillies had a Jose Iglesias. I mean, that's the perfect example of that kind of player who's playing every day, right? And is part of it, is having somebody who can be more impactful on the field than just in the like. Stubbs has great value to them off the field, and not just as the vibes guy, but also in game planning. Like, he's very involved with all the pitching strategy, and he's in on all those meetings. He's really a heady player who could probably, when his career is over, be a coach if that's the path he so wants to go. Like, he's that kind of guy. So like, you can have that and still need an energy guy who produces on the field, right? Who has the value on the field. So, but I also think more than anything, Bob, it would be nice if you could find this combination. A guy who provides that on the field boost of energy, but is also a different kind of hitter than what you have in your lineup, right? I mean, yeah, everybody would love to have a Luis Arias type bat, right? But that's the kind of guy that, go up there, get on base, make some things happen at the top of the lineup, start rallies, things along those lines. That's what was missing and has been missing from this team. You kind of thought you were getting that with Turner, and you really haven't gotten that with Turner. That's like the element. He's a little bit too much of a free swinger. You need somebody who's not going to strike out as much, who's going to take a walk, who can, run the bases a little bit, kind of get the lineup moving. And, you talk about momentum being a thing in baseball. It really is that pass the baton kind of guy, and then let your big bats drive them home. That's what's missing from the Phillies. And I think that would be a player to go out and try and find if you can find it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's just a spark notes, like a quick, like, a quick summation of
Spark
off-season
notes.
Spark Notes.
Spark
Yeah.
Notes. It's a whole different generation than me.
Well, we went online for ours, like we had
I was Cliff Notes, man.
Yeah. Now there's probably, if you're like 23 listening to this, you're like, what the hell are these guys talking about? So I think here's what I think is going to happen. One guy we didn't talk about, Jose Alvarado. The Phillies wanted no part of him in a meaningful game. He's out of here this offseason. He's not going to be back.
Yeah, but he's under contract too.
Yeah, they'll trade him. They'll try to find another project like that has some upside, and like I think he's gone.
Maybe.
I think Brandon Marsh is gone. I think Alec Boehm's gone. I think Brandon Marsh is gone. I think Alec Boehm's gone. I think they're going to trade Jose Alvarado. I still think they're going to bring back Hoffman. I feel like that's a good marriage, even though it was a disaster at the end of the year. I also think that Juan Soto is not a thing. I mean, I think they want it to be a thing, but I don't think he's going to be here. What else?
Well,
yeah,
the one thing I can say about the Soto situation is that with each passing year that he doesn't win, that John Middleton is willing to push the financial envelope.
Oh, I think that they're going to be so. Yes,
so I think there'll be players.
I think they're going to spend money this offseason. So here you go. Here's your their seed of hope. Not that I know this definitively, but I expect that the Phillies will, not because I want them to, but I expect that they will spend this offseason. And I do believe that they will. I don't know the name. I think that they will do what they have to do to get a legitimate, real offensive threat in the outfield. There's no way. And you go like, well, what do you mean? There's just no way. There's no way that you can come back next season without either a center fielder or a left fielder who is an adult, who can hit, who can play the game. That is going to happen. I wouldn't be surprised if Rojas wasn't here. This is what I say when I say there's going to be changes. I don't think that they're going to trade Castellanos. So they make a call. Do they entertain a call? Sure. But I think Castellanos is here. But I think that Marsh is out of here. I think Rojas is probably out of here. Yeah. I mean, those are the very short versions of my predictions. What do you have?
I think you're right. And I don't think that they're the favorite for Soto, but I do think that they're going to be in. But so that's what I was kind of getting at. Is I think that they're going to be at play for Soto. And I think that I'm curious to see how that plays out too, Bob, because we've had times in the past where a big name like that signs right away.
Yeah.
And we've had times in the past where big names like that take until February, March.
Yeah, late February. I think Bryce Harper took his time, yes?
Right. And it was both Harper and Machado took a long time to sign, right? So I'll be curious to see how the Soto market plays next month. If it's something that's right away, or if it's something that drags. If he doesn't sign by the winter meeting, he's not signing till February.
Yeah.
That's how I look at it.
Yeah.
But I think that the Phillies are going to be in that conversation. And then the question is, if you don't get that guy, and you should probably make it your plan A, because
you can't get caught in a situation where you're held hostage by him.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, you can't let option 2, 3, and 4 all pass by because you're putting all your eggs in the Juan Soto basket.
Right. And I think that they'll have a general idea. I think they'll know because they have enough people who are close enough with him that they'll have a general idea of where he's at and what his mindset is. So I don't think that they'll get caught holding the bag per se, but that it's got to be something that they got to either resolve quick or go to the next thing right away.
He's a Boris guy, right?
Yeah.
Well, hey, how about this? If I'm Scott Boras, I mean, he left last offseason with some egg on his face, right?
Yeah.
Juan Soto's not Jordan Montgomery or Blake Snell.
Yeah.
So he's not going to overcorrect. But you're Scott, get it done.
Yeah.
Stop dicking around with your clients.
I think you're looking at $500 million.
Yeah.
For him.
I just don't know if that's the right. I mean, dude, they go sign Juan Soto. That's the one thing that will re-energize the fan base. We didn't even talk about this. Are the Phillies the Sixers now? Whatever. That's the one thing they could do that would get everybody there game one all on board again. But
Bob,
does that even matter?
If you asked me today, if you asked me right now, who I would say is the most intriguing player to have for my team for the next decade in all of baseball, I would take Soto ahead of Ohtani. I would take him ahead of Aaron Judge. I'd take him ahead of anybody else in the game. Mookie Betts is the only one I would come close, I would think about. But even that, I think Soto's age makes him more appealing than Betts. Like, Juan Soto, to me, is the best player. And if you have an opportunity to go get him, go get him. I don't care what it costs. If you can get him and you can bring him here, it changes everything. He's a 415 on base guy.
Oh,
He's the top of your lineup. Like, it changes
everything.
Everything. So I'm all in on going for Soto, but I also am realistic enough to understand that you better have a very good plan B ready to go if you get the sense that that's not going to happen.
Yeah. Be nice if they had a couple guys that they could plug in that would be real. Like, that's the thing. If you're going to do that, though, you're going to have to find some cheaper options. You're going to have your homegrown guys actually play, like a Crawford, a Starlin Caba, an Aiden Miller. Like, you're going to need these guys, because when you spend on Turner, Harper, and Soto, the Castellanos thing will come off the books. The Schwarber thing will come off the books. The Real Muto thing will come off the books. Like, they have big contracts that will clear.
I mean, Wheeler goes up to $42 million a year next year.
Yeah. But when you're talking about AAV and stuff, like, you have some things that'll escalate and some will get moved.
Yeah.
That's where you wonder, like, do you swallow cash on a more veteran player in order to free up some short-term cash to do that deal? Or is the Castellanos deal, like, I guess we're talking about Nick at this point, basically.
Yeah.
Would you, if you can free up 30 million, but swallow 10 to get him out of here, does that make sense? Because you're going to need to invest $30-40 million a year in him coming in, like, how do you do that?
If I had, and I like Nick Castellanos, and I think that
I give him a lot of credit, honestly. Yeah. I mean, I was very impressed with how he rebounded from his start and how he played this series.
Yeah. I've always been a Nick guy, but if you told me I had to move on from Nick to make Juan Soto work, 100%.
Yeah.
I don't even think twice. I don't even think twice.
Yeah. You almost wonder if Nick would go like, yeah, I mean, I get it.
Yeah. I think he would absolutely get it. I think he would absolutely get it.
All right. So, well, we obviously are going to have a lot to talk about here over the next few weeks, few months, and we will do it. I'm not totally sure. Maybe we'll let this thing, because we'll hear everybody do the postseason stuff.
Yeah, let's see what the Phillies schedule is as far as get away and post season press conference. I'm sure we'll talk after that.
Yeah, I'm sure that if the owner has anything to say, if Dombrowski, I'm sure we'll talk to the media and we'll react off of that. That'll probably be
for sure.
Next one here.
Also, one last thing. This was a conversation, and we've had this conversation before, so I don't want to take it in the same direction that we've gone in the past. And I also want to set up with this caveat that what I'm about to say by no means whatsoever is an excuse for the Phillies. Okay? No means whatsoever is an excuse for the Phillies. But there was a lot of talk up in New York amongst the media that was there. And boy, was there a lot of media in New York. That place was packed to the gills with media. Now the Mets become the third straight number 6 seed to advance to the NLCS. The Tigers are 1 win away from being a 6 seed to get to the ALCS. And it's becoming more and more apparent that, this is a problem for Major League Baseball, that the teams who play all season long to win their divisions don't get any benefit.
Yeah.
There have been some suggestions. We've talked on this show about extending the division series to 7 games. Maybe that would make it a little bit different. But even still, like, could you imagine the Phillies coming back down 3-1? Like,
no,
probably not against this Mets team, right? So it wouldn't really have made a difference. But I guess the thought process is there was some suggestions that of different ways of going about it. I wanted to run a couple of them by you and see what you think. So the first one I wanted to run by you is this. That you have a situation where winning the division means something. So the 3 division winners, in essence, would get, quote unquote, a bye into the division series. Your number 2 and number 3 seeds would play each other. Your number 1 seed only has to wait 2 days. What you have is well, I guess 3 days because there's got to be an off day at the end of the regular season. But so 3 days instead of 5 or 6. The 6 seed plays the 5 seed. The winner of that plays the 4 seed. The winner of that plays the 1 seed in the division series. That's one option.
Yeah.
Second option, division series is played entirely at the home ballpark of the higher seed and no days off in between. So that way that the lower seeded team can't realign their pitching.
Yeah, they're really stressed coming in. Obviously provides more incentive. I hate when the regular season's importance gets diluted. I hate it.
Yeah, so
I don't hate expansion in the postseason. It is good for multiple cities. You're not that good. You can pretend you are. You can even get hot and make a run. It's fun. Phillies benefited from it. We all know that.
Sure.
But I hate the lack of importance because it does feel like, all right, great, we won the division. Fuck us. Like there's a little bit of that going on right now. And the numbers, while I want to just say sack up and figure it out, the numbers are the numbers. The data is the data. I hate, though, the idea that a playoff team could advance beyond a wild card round and not give their fans a shot to watch a postseason game. That feels shitty to me. It doesn't feel fan friendly.
Well, I agree, and you would still have it up. I mean, you could still have it in the NLC or in the League Championship Series. If you win, then you can play in front of your fans. That is the one caveat. But yeah, the notion of not letting them be able to line up their pitching.
Yeah.
There needs so I think the thing that everybody kind of agrees, whatever the thought process is the best way to go about it. People can quibble over that. But I think we all agree that the thing that needs to be rectified is that everybody still needs to be playing on the same time frame. You cannot have one team sitting for a week while other teams are playing meaningful games.
Yeah.
That's the downfall, right? Yeah. With the system. So that's what needs to change.
No, I agree. Yeah. I want to put an asterisk on that. I mean, look, there's obviously enough here that suggests that the delay hurts teams, and that's fine. I don't think the reason why I don't think that is why the Phillies lost this series is because the ways that they were exposed at the end of the regular season is exactly how they were exposed in the postseason. It's the same thing other than the bullpen. And like, you could say like that first game 1, like, oh, they were rusty, fine. But like after that, that's inexcusable. So, if the Phillies were blazing hot, like crushing the baseball all of September, and then they just showed up this weekend or this week, and this is what happened, I'd say, Jesus. But I think that...
No, I don't think it's an excuse for the Phillies at all.
I actually think it impacted Phillies fans might not want to hear this. So I think it actually did have more of an adverse impact on the Braves than it did the Phillies.
Yeah, I think you're right because it was two different...
Yeah,
the Braves were playing great baseball at that time.
Yeah, like, I mean, and that was the thing that, like, I saw a lot of Braves fans taking victory laps last night, like, see? And I'm like, but I don't know, man. Like, I gotta be honest with you. I just think that the Phillies got their ass kicked. Like, I still don't think it had anything to do with the layoff. You know?
The Dodgers are one loss away from being another division winner to be eliminated. The Guardians are one loss away from being eliminated. And if it wasn't for Giancarlo Stanton in the 8th inning last night, the Yankees could have been one loss away from being eliminated as well. You could have had all 4 of the finalists, and it still could have all 4 of the finalists in the LCS be wildcard teams. Yeah. I don't think that's good for baseball.
No. Parity only works to an extent.
Yeah.
All right. Well, for Anthony Sanfilippo, I'm Bob Wankel. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. See you guys.